Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Now autumn is upon us, but before I get onto the pike fishing and the perch fishing, I need to get some more chub and barbel fishing done, don't I? And that's the aim of the game today. I'm doing some barbel fishing, but we're going to be underwater filming this entire session, looking at the rigs underwater and seeing what we can improve to get more bites from this fish. I'm not going to hold you up, let's get straight into the video. So before we get casting out, this is a rig that I'm using today. It's the same for all my river fishing for barbel and chub, a free running ledger rig. That lead can move freely up and down the line. It's onto a quick change clip so we can unclip it and change the lead weight or put a feeder on if we need to. And then the most important bit, I've got about 1.5 to 2 foot of 8-pound fluorocarbon. That's what I always use for my barbel and chub fishing nowadays. And then down to the hook. Now I got lazy with this one. These were the first ones I could see in the bag from my recent carp fishing session. These are actually size 8 carp hooks. I never normally use these ones for barbel. I normally go for smaller fine wire hooks, but we'll see how we get on today. And on there I'm going to be putting a cube of meat on the hair. You can't really beat meat for barbel and chub, can you? Let's see what happens in this first swim. I know there's a couple of fish feeding down there. The first swim I was going to try was in the middle of nowhere, out in the countryside. There was no hard structure, no trees whatsoever, but there was a nice clean clear patch of sand in the middle of some streamer weed that looked perfect for feeding fish. So I wasted no time in getting some pellets and meat out there in the hope of attracting some fish. The rig was positioned perfectly on that sand patch. Unfortunately, a bit of weed interfered with the camera, and of course, as you can see, the weed was coming down and catching on the rig. It was catching on the line, and unfortunately we even had some catch and wrap around the hook as well. That's a problem with fishing rivers and moving water. You will pick up debris on the line, but I couldn't see it, so the rig carried on fishing. While the rig was positioned down there, I was gently throwing odd pieces of meat upstream that would roll through the swim in the hope of maybe creating some competitive feeding with any fish that might be down there. I've got a feeling the weed on the hook didn't really help with the hooking up of that fish, but on a positive note, the weed was no longer on it, and this would give us a better chance of hooking up to the next take. Oh, fish on, fish on. Yes, feels like a chub. Got them like big Duncan head shakes. Yeah, that's a chub. Good size one though. Yes. Oh, that is a stonking chub, yes. Well, I really hope I managed to capture this one on the underwater camera, because this is probably the first 5-pound chub, capturing it from the hook to the bank. That is a cracking fish, really hollow, got loads more weight to go into it over the winter time, or over the autumn time, should I say, ready for winter. It was 5 pound 1 ounce, and I think this fish could probably go up to about 5.5 pound with a bit of extra pellets and ground bait in its stomach. What do you think? And maybe a few more cubes of meat as well. What a fantastic fish. That is awesome. Right, I'm going to get this one back. We're after some barbel. So we'll see if we can get one of those. Well, after reviewing the footage, it is apparent that there's not really many fish here at all. There was only 2 chub feeding in that spot. I've caught one of them and now the swim is completely empty. So all we're going to do is move upstream now, try and find some new areas, maybe some area with some more tree cover actually that goes over the water, and we might be able to find some barbel. That is the aim of the game today. Maybe we'll move over to pellets as well. I know barbel love a bit of meat, but I've never gone wrong with pellets in the past. Let's get moving and try and find some fish. I found a new location with more tree cover. It was a bit shallower, it was a more pressured area, but I could see the barbel straight away. And after putting in just a couple handfuls of halibut pellets, these fish were really confidently feeding on the spot, and there was plenty of them as well. There must have been at least 7 barbel and probably about 7 chub, although the barbel were definitely muscling the chub out of the swim. It was time to get the rig out there quick. But this time, instead of having meat on the hair, I was fishing with two 8mm pellets to try and match the feed that was going in. And it didn't take long before the fish came back and started feeding over the swim. Of course it was a chub that was the first fish to take the bait out of all them barbel. But thankfully he didn't manage to get himself hooked up for too long and actually came off, which meant it didn't spook the swim too much and the barbel continued feeding. I wasted no time in getting that bait back out there onto the spot, and it was absolutely perfect. And it wasn't long before the barbel started feeding again. But then disaster struck. Just with one kick of the tail, the bait had absolutely vanished, completely out of shot. I actually think it went directly underneath the camera. And to make matters worse, the barbel started feeding really well and right in the area where that hook bait had been placed. Then, almost like a fishing miracle, a little group of helpers in the form of minnows decided to help me out, discovered where the hook bait was and dragged it into the shot. It just reminds me of one of the recent videos where I was carp fishing and did some underwater filming and I had a perch reposition the camera for me. Well, it happened again, this time with the minnow, and it was just in time for the barbel moving up through the swim. And would you look at that, the barbel definitely felt like something wasn't right when it picked up that bait. I've got a feeling he might have felt that larger hook. But the chub came in and gave me a great run, and unfortunately managed to throw the hook before I managed to land it and spooked off almost every fish in the swim. I wasted no time in getting it back out there, but now instead of having 7 or 8 barbel in the swim, there was just 2 barbel left behind and a few chub. I changed the way the bait was on the hook ever so slightly. Instead of having the 2 8mm pellets next to one another on the hair, I actually separated them so there was a gap in the middle, so it looked more natural on the bottom. I knew there wasn't as many fish down there and I wanted my bait to look as natural as possible. Do you like this chub that I caught? It pulled the net into the water and escaped. Never mind, he earned his freedom. Not the barbel we were after though. Those chub are a real pain, aren't they? Bloody hell. And with that chub capture, that ended the barbel fishing in this swim. All the barbel had now disappeared and it was time to just leave the bait down there in the hope that one of them other chub might come along and pick it up. Wow, so much for an underwater barbel session, but I can't really complain when I'm catching chub like this, although when these are snatching it from the jaws of the barbel, it is gutting, although I don't think there's any barbel in my swim at the minute, so I was quite happy to get a chub. And it's quite a nice one as well. This one is probably a fish, probably about 4.5 to 5 pound, probably closer to 4.5. They're all cracking fish, I can't complain, and the takes are mad, they're almost ripping the rod into the water. It's probably the way I've positioned it on the bank though. But it's really, really cool. Let's get this one back and try and find some barbel. Bloody hell, where are they all gone? I was having some great sport. I managed 2 or 3 chub to the bank and I lost a couple to the weed. And the very last one actually got me stuck in some snags and I had to pull for break. That meant I had to change the rig ever so slightly. I retied, but instead of putting on the size 8 hook that I'd been using before, I decided to go much smaller, much more towards my standard style of barbel fishing. I fished a size 12 hook with a single 6mm pellet. Now a lot smaller, a lot daintier, and how would that affect the fishing? It was obvious that this bait was definitely better disguised amongst the feed pellets I was throwing in, and the reaction from the chub was almost instant. The chub were picking up the hook bait, but they just weren't getting hooked at all. They would shake their head and throw the bait with ease. All these takes that I filmed from the rod and the water are perfectly synced up, so every one of these bites that you are seeing is the exact same take underwater as what you can see on the rod tip. Every time they picked it up, it would give one tap on the rod tip and that'd be it. Almost looked like a line bite, nothing that you'd really want to strike at. In fact, it got so infuriating that by the last take, I just sat with the rod, and the moment it did one thump, I struck and still missed the bite. It was clear that on the size 8 carb hooks, these fish were generally quite easy to hook into, but that meant that all the barbel would be spooked off every single time you caught one. And with that frustration, it led me to change back over to the size 8 hook and 2 8mm pellets separated on the hair, and it gave an almost instant result. That chub came to the bank within 5 minutes of changing over, but this was a eureka moment. It was time to go back to that size 12 hook and 6mm pellet on the hair. That was because I didn't want to catch any more of these chub. Maybe if I sat long enough with that bait in the water, maybe a barbel or two would come back into the swim. And if the chub can't get hooked up on this small bait, maybe the swim would be left undisturbed long enough for me to get the barbel back feeding and maybe even catch one. And within just half an hour, we already had one barbel come back to the swim. Now that's very sad considering we started off with about 7 or 8 feeding comfortably, but one fish and one take is all we want. Well, that couldn't have worked out any better. Literally about 5 minutes before the barbel picked up the hook bait, I had a chub come down, mouth it, didn't feel the hook and left the hook bait in place. That meant the barbel didn't get spooked off, came over, took it as happy as Larry. It didn't feel the hook go in because it was obviously a smaller hook, but it couldn't reject it, meaning it got hooked up and a clean take. Well, we finally managed it. We got a barbel to the bank after changing back over to the hook and hook length that I would use my barbel fishing, and the one that I was struggling to get hooked up with a chub. I'm a big believer when it comes to river fishing that bigger hooks tend to be better for hooking the chub, and smaller fine wire hooks are better for the barbel. And if you look at the front of the barbel's mouth, those lips are so soft and smushy and rubbery that actually smaller fine wire hooks will go in there and penetrate the lip a lot easier than a great big chunky hook that the barbel can feel with those barbules and try and avoid. I've just caught a couple of chub on the bigger hook, shorter hook length, changed back over to a smaller hook and a longer hook length, and the barbel has got absolutely nailed. Finally, God, there was so many chub down there and the barbel all disappeared. One of them came back and then we've got him, and I've already had him out of water too long talking, haven't I? Let's get him back. What a beauty. Well guys, that is the end of the underwater filming, but it's not the end of this session. I am gonna say this video was supposed to be underwater filming up to a certain point. We figure out how the fish are wanting it. Then we go out for the rest of the session and target the barbel and try and catch them on the methods and the things that we've learned in the video. But that would mean the video would be really long. So instead I'm splitting it into two parts. This is the end of the underwater filming video, and the next video, which you'll see next week, is going to be my session just targeting the barbel with what we've learned from this video and from this underwater footage. I've already done some fishing. I might have already caught some fish. I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but you have to watch next week's video. I might catch a really big fish. I might even catch a PB. I mean, you'll have to watch next week's video to find out. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found some interesting stuff in the footage that I captured. I find it really interesting to watch and interesting to see right before my eyes, well, what I thought was sort of going on. I've always fished smaller fine wire hooks for barbel, and I've always done really well. So yeah, look forward to the next video. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's, and I'll catch you guys later.